got the flu right after I came back from a tour. You know, we had done this West Coast run, and this was in January, we were being so careful with, you know, all masking and social distancing, and we were vaxxed and boosted and washing our hands all the time, and you know, trying to get everybody in the facilities to do the same thing, and the fans and everything. We were so careful. And then I got the flu on the plane ride home.
It's funny that we live in a moment where flu is like best case scenario.
Yeah.
You start getting all the symptoms and everything, and then immediately your mind goes to the thing.
Exactly. I raced off to get a COVID test, and thankfully it was negative, but they said, let's give you a flu test. And sure enough, that's what I had. So, but, you know, I'm fine. It was just the flu. It sucked for a while, but here I am. So
I've now been on a plane twice this year, which just makes it twice throughout the entire pandemic. And I managed to get sick both times. And I wonder if my sister told me the same thing. She flew a week or two ago, and, you know, she's like, I had my mask on the entire time and I still managed to get sick. And I just wonder if all of the immunities that we've been building up our entire lives are just completely out the window now because we spent 2 years being away from everybody.
I mean, that's a pretty, you know, that's an interesting take on it. I hope that's not true, but yeah, we are sort of all canaries in the coal mine now, and we're kind of emerging and rubbing our eyes and being, how do I act again? What do I do? And so I think we're vulnerable in a lot of ways right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I went to a wedding last week, and I had that experience of all of my regular social anxiety that I have was compounded by the fact that I hadn't actually like been in front of human beings for 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know how to act anymore. And I'm sort of seeing it even in audiences at our shows. You know, it's like we've tried to do as much live performing as we could throughout this whole time, you know, with varying success, because you know, you book a date several months in advance, and then by the time you get there, there's another surge, or, you know, the theater is closed down or whatever. So you try to do your best. But every time we've come out, it seems to take the audience to about a quarter of the way through the show to remember about, like, oh, we applaud, and oh, we respond to the artist, and oh, we laugh if something's funny. And it's like they just, you know, kind of forgot how to act, but then it all comes back. Definitely there was a moment the first few times, like just right at the beginning of the show, where I'm, you know, my internal mental voice is like, this is a ridiculous thing for a grown person to do for a living. And what are you doing standing up here and, you know, in these uncomfortable shoes and, you know, with all this makeup on, and this is crazy. But, you know, then you get into the second or third song and you really start to hit your stride, and you're like, oh yeah, I understand. I remember why I do this with my life.
I'm not trying to give you career advice, but I think that you've been doing this long enough that you've earned comfortable shoes on stage.
Yeah, I thought I might go like the whole Chris Robinson vibe with like the bare feet and the nice plushy oriental carpet and stuff, but that's just another thing to carry around, is the carpet. So
it's a trade-off, right? Because you're packing less shoes but more carpet. So
that's true. Could balance out in that way. Yeah.
If you've played extensively with the Dead, I feel like there's this whole other sort of part of you that you can kind of tap into going barefoot.
Yeah, I mean, I can lay claim to a bit of that hippie chick stuff. So for sure, maybe I'll do that this weekend. We have a show on Long Island, and maybe I'll do that this weekend. Go barefoot. And
I say this as a native Californian who now lives in New York, but I feel like that's kind of your vibe. I feel like you could very comfortably be a San Francisco or Los Angeles person.
I mean, I do love the West Coast, but I was born in Kentucky, so born and raised there. So I think I have a little bit of that, you know, maybe just a touch of that hillbilly, you know, crossed with the hippie in there as well. So, I mean, there's bohemia everywhere. So I would feel at home in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I've been in New York for about 17 years at this point. I mean, obviously it's not for everyone, and it famously can be a difficult place to live.
Yeah.
Is this where you always wanted to be?
I mean, I didn't grow up dreaming about moving to New York City. I came to New York because that was where the school was that I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to NYU and study in the film department there. So New York was almost like an afterthought. But then once I got here, New York is never going to be anybody's afterthought. It takes all you've got to kind of navigate it, especially coming from a place that I came from, and being thrown into it. But it's also really exciting. And especially for someone who wants to be an artist, it's just, there's no end to the inspiration that you can find, even just walking down the street. There's so much street life and so many different kinds of people, different ethnicities and different fashion sensibilities and different sexual preferences. And, it's all just out there in the street. So it's an endlessly inspiring place.
If not all of us, most of us had a sense growing up of like wanting to escape or feeling like there was something out there, and I'm guessing that must have been part of the appeal of at least moving to a big city, whether it was New York or somewhere else.
Well, I think I could have been fine to stay in Kentucky where I was, because, at that point, Louisville was, that was a fairly big city compared to the little town that I grew up in. But to me, it was just about, am I going to be able to do what I want to do here? And, the opportunity to go to New York and to study film didn't exist. For me, that was the only place that I wanted to go. So, so it was about what I was going to do as opposed to feeling that I needed to escape. But, that being said, once I got a taste of New York, it was very addictive. And I've not thought about moving back to Kentucky. Let's put it that way. I mean, I love it there and I have family there and I love to go and visit. But I think, New York is kind of it for me.
When did you know you wanted to be a filmmaker?
When I first went to college, I went to the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, and I started taking some theater classes. And I got really into directing, and I directed some scenes in classes, and I directed a play in the small black box theater. And I really liked it. But then I thought to myself, this is really cool, but what percentage of the population goes to the theater in America? It's a very small percentage. What percentage of the population goes to see movies? Pretty much everybody. So I thought, I'd be interested in doing some stuff that, would get seen in this wider way. And plus I always loved movies, and I loved, the sort of the quirky indie foreign films, anything that I could find. We had this midnight movie at this theater called the Vogue Theater in Kentucky where I grew up. And it would play, sort of things like Bette Midler and the Divine Miss M, or, concert movies, or, sort of things like Harold and Maude. And it just that was really interesting to me. The weirder, the better. So I was really drawn to kind of the European directors and European cinema. And as much as I could learn about it, I wanted to know more about it.
It's so funny, when we're at that point in our lives and we're trying to figure out what is a reasonable career path to think like, oh yeah, film. I could be a film director. That's a relatively easy thing that I could do for a living.
Well, I guess ignorance is a real, boon in those situations.
It can be a motivator for sure.
Yeah. When you don't know how hard it is to do something, you just plow ahead and do it. And then you're in the middle of it and you're like, why did I think I could do this? But then by the end, you're like, I'm glad that I didn't know all that stuff, because I would never have started.
Did you progress to that point in your film education
where I thought it was too hard? No, it really was that music started taking over when I still hadn't graduated from film school. I still never have. I'm a college dropout, sad to say. But I started to get so involved in the music scene and started to feel like there was something so compelling about it that I would regret it if I didn't try to see, what I could do in this arena. I fell so hard for it. And, filmmaking it's really exciting and it's great. But from the first idea that you have to the finished product, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of people on a team. It takes a lot of equipment. Whereas if you're singing, music, one thing, but singing in particular, it's much more immediate, and it comes out of your body, and you can throw your entire self into it, not just your intellect, but also your heart and your soul and your physicality. So I think there was something about that really kind of captured my imagination. And I thought, well, film school will always be there if I want to finish it, but this is happening now, and I think I'd regret it if I don't see where I can take it.
It's really good insight. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily have it when they're younger, that, and not that you can't start a new career later in life, but that this is sort of the moment where I have the energy to be able to do this, that I can like wait tables or do whatever I need to do during the day, and then like commit myself to this thing at night, because like I can still work 8 hours and then have the energy to invest myself into that. But it's, for most people, that's a pretty small window.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the key is that you really commit to it. There are people who, think will really want to do something, but are kind of on the fence about it and are kind of holding back because, I have to wait until this thing happens in my life, or I have to wait until I'm ready, or I have to wait until I get this or that, degree or this or that stamp of approval from somebody. You need to give yourself permission to commit to it. And I think that's really, really an important part of it.
In a way, you have to be open to the possibility that it might not work out, because it is
sure, that you'll fail. Yeah.
At that point, did it feel any more or less realistic than a career in film?
Yeah, I know. I went for some real doozies, didn't I? I guess it felt just as realistic because I could sort of see that it was, that there was something real going on there, even though I might have just been doing, playing in some tiny little bar and there was 100 people in the audience, it still was real. And it was, the music was happening and I was feeling it and the audience was feeling it. And there was some real communication happening. So I guess to me, that was, sort of proof that at least it's worth taking the next step. I wasn't thinking about, way off into the distance and, whatever. I was just thinking what can happen next with this. And because it seemed to be real to me from the very beginning, that was not so hard to imagine.
When you're describing the immediacy, I mean, obviously the process of making an album is something that can take a long time, but the visceral feeling that you get, I'm guessing standing on stage and singing is probably even more in line with that live theater experience that you had early on, in that you have an immediate reaction. That's something that you'll probably never really get from making a film.
Yeah. And I mean, it's similar to doing a recording. Yeah. That is a long process and it can be very involved. I happen to really enjoy it. But it also is not without its frustrations. But at the end of it, you have this recording, which is great, but it's not the same as playing music in front of people. There's something really, it can be really magical. It can also be, when you're opening yourself up like that, if you feel like not connecting or I'm having a bad night and you start to get into your head, it can also be a horrible experience. But thankfully, for the most part, I love doing it and I still really enjoy it. And I still really find that there's nothing else like it.
There's a way in which it's kind of like any job, and that there's just going to be some nights that you don't necessarily want to be there, and that it's kind of difficult going through the motions.
Or just that you think that you suck and you're sucking in front of hundreds of people and, they all paid to see you. And, I can go down that rabbit hole of self-doubt just like anybody.
You still have those nights?
I mean, yeah, I do. But invariably, this happened to me a lot before the pandemic, because I would go out and sign autographs after the shows. And even on a night like that, where I couldn't get out of my head and I felt like, oh, I'd suck and this is terrible. And who is that guy in the back leaving and, stuff like that. I would go out and meet the audience afterwards and they would just be like, oh my God, that was amazing. I can't believe it. This is the best show I've ever seen. Or I can't believe you did this song. And, and just person after person after person would tell me that it meant something to them. So even if I wasn't understanding that or catching on to that, or even if I couldn't get out of my own head, it was still worth it for them and it was still valuable to them. So that was a real lesson to me as well.
It's very in vogue to talk about imposter syndrome. I think that is something that everybody experiences to some degree. I don't know if that's exactly what you're describing, but I wonder, does that go away over time? Does external validation and realizing that like you've been able to build this career that people are really interested in, does it help blunt that?
I mean, I think just having done this for so long, you understand that you're going to have some nights like that and you don't take it too hard. And, you know, I sometimes will make this joke, like if I feel like I've had a bad night or something, I'll, you know, come backstage and be like, okay, I'm quitting the business. You know, but it's just a joke. It's just a way to sort of dispel tension. And, you know, you understand that even if you aren't having a great night, the audience might be having a great night, or that person who has been waiting for years to see you and this is their first chance, or that mom who brought her daughter to see your show, like they may be having a great night. So it's really not about me. And that's something that you kind of start to understand after doing it for decades.
Was there ever a point where it didn't feel like a joke, where you sort of seriously consider that maybe it's, I don't know, time to go back to film school, or maybe this just isn't quite clicking?
Well, you know, when I do start to feel like that is when I have to travel a lot and be away from my daughter. That's when I am like seriously questioning this as a life choice. And just, you know, the travel itself, like sometimes we'll have to get up at 7:00 in the morning after we did a show the night before and drive for 6 hours and then do a sound check and then, you know, talk to somebody at a radio station and then do a show and then drive some more. And, you know, it beats you up, and I'm not 20 years old anymore. So there are definitely times where, you know, if I'm just feeling physically like, ugh, this is too much, then I start to think, well, maybe you should go home. But then we do the show, and then you know, it's usually great. And even if it's not great, then there's something great about it. And, you know, so it's, it feels worth it. And, you know, I have to say in particular right now, I think doing live music is, you know, I think it's a very important thing, not just for individuals, you know, me, the band, the audience, because we need that for our souls, but also I think it's a good thing for communities to have a place where people can come together and, you know, nobody has to know what anybody's political party is, and nobody knows if the person next to them is this or that, you know, believes in this or that, you know, opinion. And, you know, we live in a time when we're so polarized and so divided. It's nice to have a place where people can come and just see each other as human beings enjoying this, you know, this sort of primal thing of hearing music, hearing live people play live music. So I feel like any live music right now, you know, has a job to do to try to hold us together, you know, in a time when we seem to be just coming apart.
It's a hard line to walk though, right? Because, you know, you feel that you need to be in a certain sense political, or at least address some of the injustices that you see in the world. You know, you had that record come out not long ago. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, is there sort of a certain expectation that people coming out and listening to your music will kind of generally be in the same ballpark?
I mean, yes and no. I think I do have fans who probably align more with my political views because, you know, I go on Twitter and I go on Instagram and I talk about things. So, and I think anybody who's followed me for a while knows that I have been a longtime supporter of Planned Parenthood, and you know, it's not a big secret, but I also feel like there are people who are my fans who are at the opposite end of the, you know, the political spectrum with their beliefs. But, you know, I don't think that means that they shouldn't come to my show. You know, I mean, I think as I say, I feel like there's so many things that are trying to drive a wedge in, you know, between us. And you know, and there's good reasons that we disagree with each other and people feel passionately about it. It's not that I don't understand that, but I do think that it starts to feel like it doesn't benefit us to only focus on that and not to try to focus on the things that we have in common.
I got the sense hearing you talk about that record specifically that it's worth potentially maybe alienating some of your listenership because it's that important to get these ideas down on record.
Yeah, but I think I've always done that. You know, I've always been very open about the things that I support and the things that I don't support. And anybody who's decided that, that me being pro-choice and working to raise money for Planned Parenthood doesn't jive with their values, they're already gone. They've been gone for years. So this is not a new thing for me.
I mean, do you still get some degree of pushback?
I mean, a little bit. I try not to read the comments in my social media stuff because what's the upside of that? So I just probably there's a lot more people who are mad at me or saying nasty things about me online that I'm just not hearing. But I'm not letting that change what I do, and I'm not letting that impact my day-to-day life.
This is a conversation that I had with a lot of people, is that it's when the other side of the political argument is that people shouldn't have basic human rights, that it's not really an argument, right?
No. And, you also, I think you have to look at what social media has done in the last handful of years to contribute to this polarization that we're experiencing. And also, look at the history of that, look at where that comes from. Who are the people who benefit from us being so polarized? And, who are the people who benefit by gaining power from riling up their base with this or that, ridiculous, insane, conspiracy theory? Who benefits from that and who suffers? Where this is not something that came about as some natural flowering of our national debate. This is something that I think has been somewhat orchestrated. It's not like those differences weren't there to begin with, but I think the fact that they have become, that they loom so large in American life right now has very much been orchestrated, and it's been orchestrated for other people's profit and for their power. I have to think about that before I spend a lot of time being really incensed at somebody because they hold a belief that I find despicable. And I'm not talking about just random people on the internet. I'm talking about family members of mine, so I have to try to understand where that comes from before I react just in anger and escalate it to some crazy point.
I'm from basically around San Francisco, and I live in Queens now, and I feel like that's sort of I basically only live on these two coasts around fairly urban areas, and it's given me certain probably prejudices, when it comes to the way people are, particularly like in a place like Kentucky. But I mean, do you feel like the general politics that you have, that you were kind of in the minority growing up?
I don't think I was much aware of politics growing up, not nearly as much as I am now. But I will say, and definitely, Kentucky is a red state. That's no secret that more people, voted. I mean, Mitch McConnell is the senator. So
Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, it's a blazingly red state, but it's also not a monolith. There are plenty of people who are, on the left and, and have more liberal political opinions and, in our, social justice warriors and all that. There's plenty of people like that in that state as well. So I think, if I did decide to move back to Kentucky or something, I don't think I would feel like I was surrounded by people who, were threatened by my point of view. I probably would socialize and see people who more agree with me, as most people do these days.
Was it college? When did you really get in touch with that side of yourself?
Yeah, I think it was when I started going to college, and just in particular the feminist causes and reproductive freedom and all of that. Just to me, seemed so obvious that it's wrong to force someone to have a baby if they don't want to do that. It's just wrong in all kinds of ways. And, and as a young woman, of course, I felt very much directly that this affected my life too. So I think that was the issue that really kind of lit a fire under me. And then, once I became a little bit more active, then you start to look around and you start to see, all the rest of the things that aren't really right, and liberties that are that are under fire, and people who are being oppressed, and people who need help, you know? So, I mean, I think for me that the thing to do in this moment in time is, you know, we're divided. Yes, people don't agree. Yes, you know, it's a very frightening time, but I still know what I believe to be right. And I know that there are energies that I have that can be put towards trying to make things better for people who need my help. And it's really just that simple. You know, you can do whatever any other citizen of this country can do. I also happen to have a platform. You know, it's not the hugest one, but I have something of a platform where I can make music about the things that I believe in too. So yes, it's a scary time, but us grownups, we got a lot of work to do. So let's get at it. You know, I guess is really all I have to say.
You know, you hear all these stories of people. I remember, you know, like Dick Cheney having a lesbian daughter, and all of a sudden, you know, he's like kind of on board with LGBTQ rights. And it's just like, you know, moving to a place like New York and just being around other people and, you know, getting to know them, that sort of tends to shift you in that direction. And so there's like so many stories of just like the politicians who were like staunchly anti something else. And then somebody who was directly impacted by that became a part of their life and their position changed.
Well, I mean, I wish that happened more. You know, I think that's a rare example. I think it's probably more likely that, you know, these days that politician would be so terrified to change their mind and do so publicly that they would just, you know, pretend that they believe something that they don't, or, you know, or sacrifice their family relationship for their political power. I find that happens more often than the opposite. I wish that were true.
I used to ask people when it came to writing political songs, whether they felt that music could affect change. But I think a more appropriate question is, have you witnessed music actually affecting change in the world?
That's a really good question. I don't think that a song is going to solve a political problem, but I do think that music can change people, and that people are the ones who, you know, make the changes in the world. So I feel like, you know, a song like "This Land Is Your Land" by Woody Guthrie, you know, it didn't fix the Dust Bowl, but it also allows everyone to feel that they belong in this country. And that is a bedrock belief that then impacts how people will act and how people will hopefully treat each other. So I think it's hard to trace some direct line between, oh, here's a song lyric and here's the result of that song lyric. I think it's much more mysterious than that. But I do think it does have an impact, you know, not least of which because if someone is, you know, if some gay kid is living in a family where their parents believe that homosexuality is a sin and they're going to send them off to, you know, a reconditioning place to try to cure them of being gay or whatever, like a song that allows that kid to be more accepting of themselves and to give that kid courage to deal with that situation, you know, that's political too. And I think that is the way in which music has that kind of power.
I think probably an understated part of it too is the way that it brings people together. You know, I often talk to people who in, you know, like middle school or high school felt like they were outcasts, and then they were lucky enough to kind of to find their group. Music is kind of the perfect opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also allows people to feel less alone. You know, it's if a musician or an artist has written a song that feels like it's explaining exactly the thing that you feel, then that makes you feel less alone. That makes you feel like somebody in the world understands you, and you're not crazy and you're not a freak, and that's a wonderful thing. You know, that's a wonderful thing. It certainly has happened to me that I've heard that in other people's songs, and I would hope, and, you know, people have told me that that's something that they got from my songs. And I just think it's a wonderful thing.
Was there anything in particular in your formative years that you feel like really sort of flicked on that switch for you?
You mean the music switch or the political switch?
The music switch, in terms of actually like really connecting with something in a deep way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always just loved it and felt that it was magic. I can remember being a little kid, maybe I was 5 or 6, and I was out in the woods and by myself, and I was building a fort out of, sticks stuff, and I had brought this little bitty Radio Shack transistor radio with me, and that song, that Minnie Riperton song, Lovin' You, came on, and I started singing along to it, and I just had this feeling of just this pure joy. I mean, it just music has always been really has always just gone right to my core. So, and I also was lucky because when I was very young, I got some encouragement and some training. I was in this school choir. It was a madrigal choir, and we would sing these old English 5 and 6 part harmony madrigal songs. And my teacher, Carolyn Browning, was always very encouraging, and she really challenged us as a class and also me as an individual. And I think I learned a lot of just, basics about harmony and about, just blending your voice with other voices. And I still love singing harmony so much. So I think that was a moment that, or a time in my life when I really connected with music, and it meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I like that you picked Minnie Riperton, and I feel like she just doesn't get, for whatever reason, the credit she deserves. But she's it's almost like listening to Bach for the first time, or like Good Vibrations or something. Like there's something almost transcendent in her voice.
Oh yeah, fantastic singer, and just such a beautiful tone too. Oh my God, what an instrument she had. Amazing.
We kind of started the conversation talking about confidence and self-doubt, but I've heard your story of that early transition of, going from being a film student to really realizing that music was something that you could do. And the story is you standing in front of a crowd and singing a Billie Holiday song, and just talk about that. Strikes me as something that takes an incredible amount of confidence to do in front of a crowd of strangers.
Well, it wasn't a big crowd. It was
even so. I mean, yeah. I don't know if I could do that in front of 2 people.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I might have been trying to impress the guy that I was with, and I kind of knew, like, I didn't think of myself as being like a professional grade singer. I knew that I had a nice voice. So I think I was just maybe trying to, impress him or something. And, I don't know. I'm not sure. I would tell you that I was scared to do it, and that I would, for a long time, when I would go back to these open mic nights, and even when I started playing my own shows, I was terrified. I would be standing up there grabbing onto the mic stand and with my eyes closed, and I would be like barfing, in the dressing room a couple hours before. Like it was bad. But it took me a lot of just repeating of the experience to finally be like, okay, no one is going to die. You're not going to die. It's okay. And, and just to be able to relax and enjoy it.
People talk about authenticity these days. I mean, did it ever seem strange, or, to kind of, to do like a Billie Holiday song, or to play like a blues song?
I mean, I think I just loved Billie Holiday, and it was a song that I knew, the song God Bless the Child. And, I don't think there's anything, I think I understand what you're saying. Like, is there a certain amount of cultural appropriation for a white girl to be singing a Billie Holiday song, or to be singing, in a blues bar or whatever? And, I've thought about that. I didn't think about it very much when I was doing it. I just knew that this was the kind of music that I loved, and that the expressiveness of the singing really captured me, and that I had some kind of a talent for it, and some kind of a feel for it. But later on, I started to feel like, well, I'm learning from this amazing tradition. There are other people who, who came up in this tradition, who never got the credit or the money that they deserved in doing this. So, what obligation do I have as someone who has learned so much from this, community of musicians, to give back to them or to pay homage to them? And, I think for me, being able to, it's funny. I don't want to say that this feels like I had an obligation to do it and I'm repaying an obligation, but I was able to produce a couple of records for my friends, the Holmes brothers, who are an amazing group and were, mentors of mine and fabulous. And at the moment that they asked me to work with them, I had this big success. So I felt like I was, of course I wanted to do it and I loved them and I was super excited to do it. And they weren't doing me any, it wasn't like they were doing me a big favor or I was doing them a big favor, but it did happen at a moment where I did have a lot of attention. So when people asked me things or talked to me in interviews, I could say, oh, I'm doing this with the Holmes brothers. Have you heard about them? And I could talk them up. I felt like at least I can use this platform that I have to let people understand that in my life, the people who've taught me a lot coming from this blues community are these guys, the Holmes brothers, and you got to check them out because they're amazing. And we went on tour together. And when I did a gig opening for Bob Dylan, I had them come and be the band. So I really just kept trying to give credit where credit was due. I don't think that makes me, a super special person. I think it's just, that's kind of the very least that you can do to honor this community where this music comes from.
Even beyond that, even day to day, you have this opportunity, for people who, whether it's, they get hooked from your big single or something else, they come in and you're able to sort of, oh, hey, here's this music that you wouldn't have necessarily sought out yourself.
Yeah. And just to give credit to the people who've influenced you and the amazing soul artists and Mavis Staples, Netta James and Otis Redding and Al Green. And, people should know about these amazing artists. If they don't, then, and if I'm the person who tells them about it, great. I think somebody came up to me at a gig once and said, I had heard of Ray Charles, but I'd never listened to him until you talked about him in your song. And I was like,
I know him from the Pepsi commercial, but
well, yeah, he's pretty good. Right. Yeah.
I'm a big Captain Beefheart fan and I'm there's like a couple of connections there. What's the Beefheart connection?
I'm just a fan and, I really like that record Trout Mask Replica. And I like how weird he is. And I covered a song called Her Eyes Are a Blue Million Miles, before I even had a big record deal. I don't know, just a fan. So when we were trying to pull together some different loops to work with in the songwriting process, that was just a place that I wanted to go because I was like, oh, here's this Captain Beefheart CD that I have. Let's try that. It's just super. If for people who don't know, he's kind of like Tom Waits before Tom Waits. He's got these super crunchy, his production techniques. He's got these super crunchy grooves and really interesting feel. And so, so it seemed to work.